proudest day, and the proudest time, and the seat of a rally car, because that day and that hour and those minutes, I got the bit between my teeth. You know, I really stood up and was counted and said, this is not getting away. I remember when we pulled on our helmets and Donald says to me, what are we doing? I said, we're going for gold, Barrett. That's all was said. I can still picture that run. That was just the best run ever.
Welcome to Krunching Gears, the rally podcast. And Connor, we have a very special episode this time.
Yeah, we're always looking to bring, the behind-the-scenes stories, and this time we're looking back at, one of the spectaculars from the Group B era.
Yeah, anybody that listens to this podcast will know my fascination, I suppose, for want of a better word, about the Metro 6R4, the love of my life when it comes to rally cars, or one of them anyway. So the opportunity to speak to one of the guys behind the Metro was just, we couldn't say no to it, could we?
No, absolutely not. Like, we're always on the lookout for people who, directly been at the coalface and been involved in the stories, to do with rallying and to do motorsport. And the Group B era was just absolutely amazing. And to get the chance to speak to one of the Austin Rover engineers whose specific role was to work on the car it was too good an opportunity to miss.
Yeah, and it's going to be Wynne Mitchell we're going to speak to. You're going to hear from him in a few minutes. And the detail he went into and the information he gave us, it was like just been transported back to 1984, isn't it? You can hear all the stories.
That's it. It's amazing to when we find out how long that car had been in development for, before it actually made an appearance. And, some of the jigsaw pieces we weren't aware of that Wynne was able to fill in and give us that bit of, insight. It was just, look, there's over an hour of podcast here, and we could easily have had maybe 3 or 4 hours, listening to him.
That's for sure. So anyway, I think without further ado, let's hear from Mr. Wynne Mitchell. And the first question I asked him, how did he get involved in motorsport?
Well, I was born in a little village in South Wales, and my father had buses, so there was mechanical fluid in my blood. And then when I left school, I came to Coventry to serve in a student apprenticeship with what at that time was Roots, became Chrysler and things of that sort. And I started off after I'd grown up and finished off my studies, I went to work on the IMP project, which was still in the prototype form. And as the years progressed, the IMP Sport came along, and I was sort of involved with the IMP Sport and what they were doing to the standard IMP to make it into a sport version. At the same time, the competition department was developing it for rallying. So they thought it'd be a good idea if they knew what we were doing and we knew what they were doing. And I became a sort of liaison between the competitions department and engineering. And that grew then from the IMP to the Avenger. And I had the opportunity of joining the competitions department when they restarted after the London-Sydney success, because the department was virtually closed. You're successful, so they close you down, which is a bit of a strange thing to do. Right? So that was in 1972. I was transferred from engineering to competitions department, and I worked there on the Avenger and then the Sunbeam Lotus. And then
sorry, one then just to cut, and you would have known Rosemary Smith then as well too. She was part of that.
Yes. I knew Rosemary in the IMP days.
Yeah.
And testing down at Bagshot, which we did a lot of testing in Bagshot then. I went down there and rode with Rosemary round the Bagshot test. And I remember we were sitting round the table having lunch, and there was a break, and there was Andrew Cowan, Rosemary Smith, Desert Dell and me. And I said, Scotland, Ireland, England. Well, all of us sitting around the table. Yes, I knew Rosemary, but not as well as I knew Andrew and Peter Harper and some of those. Yes. Rosemary, obviously she won the Tulip Rally in IMP, didn't she? Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. She was a very good driver, you know. But Des used to say she used to hang on to second gear 8,000 RPM because she felt safer. because once you lift it off, the car slowed down very quickly. That's an exaggeration. She was a good driver, yes.
Yeah.
And I had a break then for about 18 months. I went to work for what was Salisbury Transmission, became GK and Axles light division. And one day Bill Blydenstein rang me up and asked if I would become involved with them on the Chevette and the Nissan 240 RS. Yeah. So I continued working at Salisbury Transmission, but doing that at weekends and in my holidays with Tony Pond originally, and then with Russell Brooks and Terry Cabey. And from there, where did I go? Right, I went from there to Audi Sport UK, which was Dave Sutton, and running the Quattro. Yes. I was travelling from Coventry to London every day, which is 100 miles each way, down the M4 while they were widening it. So it was an absolute nightmare. Yeah. I was like a zombie from Wednesday on. But I moved there because David Sutton said he was going to move from Acton in London to the Midlands. But he didn't do so during my time. So really it got too much for me. And then John Davenport of Austin Rover, he came to see me and he offered me employment. I don't know how legal that step was actually. I think I was paid out of petty cash or fuel or something of that sort. And I joined Austin Rover in July 1984. At that time, there were 3 Metros in existence. 001, the red one, which had been built by Williams, and then 002, 003, which were built at Cowley from Williams. I'm going to say not chassis or body shop.
Prototype or whatever.
The other 3 were prototypes, yes. So I'd been there about a week when they took all 3 cars and all the spares to Almeria in southern Spain to do some testing at Michelin's test site, out of the site of prying eyes and things of that sort. Yeah. And we went there, and it was my sort of introduction to the 6R4.
And at that stage, was it still running the red colour scheme that we associate with the early cars, the 13-inch wheels and all that at that stage? That's right, yes. Now, originally, it was Williams obviously designed the car. Austin Rover didn't design the car. John Davenport found the funds for Williams to carry on this. After talking to Patrick Head, after a test session they'd had in... can't remember exactly where now, with SD1, and they were talking about the new regulations. The TR8 was finished, and they had to do something. And they were talking about Group B, which was really a free-for-all, because you had to build 200 cars, and the spec was up to you, almost. Mm-hmm. It was totally outrageous, really, compared with Group A and all the tight regulations that had preceded it. So the car was designed by Williams. They were hoping originally to have a Honda engine because they were tied up with Honda in the Grand Prix class, but Honda didn't come up with an engine. So the build of the car was in progress with no engine. So what David Wood and his right-hand man, Bob Farley, decided to do, they took a Rover V8 and cut 2 cylinders off it, make it into a V6. And I really mean they cut 2 cylinders off it, because with the original ones, you could see the welding around the block where they put the rear cover back on. They did sort of become more sophisticated and cast a few blocks later on. But that was the car, that was the engine that did all the basic development on the car. So that would have been a 2.5 V6. It was 2.5 litres. Yeah. And it was 3 litres. Sorry, it was 3 litres. Okay. It was three quarters of a 4 litre.
and why go for the V6? Why not stick with the V8 or try and see if the V8 would work?
The car was too small.
Okay.
As everybody says, the Maestro was a more sensible car to have chosen, but the company thought that the Metro did not have the appeal of the Mini, and it was being bought by people of greater older generation, yes. Right, yes. So they wanted some or other to give it a spark, and that's why the Metro was chosen. It was a very, very tight car to got everything in. The V8 was too big, as you can imagine, and the V6 was decided upon. Now, when they saw that Honda weren't going to come up with an engine, it was up to then David Wood to design an engine from the word go specifically for the 6R4.
Right.
And that's what he did with the help of Bob Farley and also consultant Chris Walters. But as I said, a lot of the basic development work was carried out on this 230 horsepower V6.
Aye, but that was only a 2-valve engine as well, too.
It was a 2-valve engine, oh yes, it was. But interestingly, that car did quite a few rallies in the hands of Tony Pond, and despite the fact it was comparable in brake horsepower to some of the existing two-wheel drive cars like the Escort and the Sunbeam and things like that, so this was much quicker. I mean, it was four-wheel drive, and all of a sudden, the advantage of four-wheel drive was hitting us in the face. It was. I've written that it seemed more like not twice the grip, but 4 times the grip sometimes. When I first rode in a 6R4, I just couldn't believe how quick it was on the loose. I said it's almost as quick as it is on tarmac. That's not true, but it was very, very quick.
And you had experienced the Grip 4 cars, the Sunbeam, and you probably did. You ever get a run with Toivonen, and you knew how quick the car could be on tar or on gravel?
Well, I did ride with Toivonen. The very first time he came to this country, he competed in the RAC in a 2-litre Sunbeam, 150. His car, 150 horsepower thing. We were over at Myra, which is the Motor Industry Research Association test ground at Lindley, with the Sunbeam Lotus development car, trying to decide on which rear suspension layout to use for the production car and therefore the competition car. And we were testing over with Tony, and Toivonen came over to scrub in his races. Des had given him some races. Well, I rode round the ride and handling circuit with him. It was an eye-opener because whereas Tony, being a test driver, stuck strictly to the concrete road surface, he was cutting the corners across the grass and all that type of thing. But in fact, after I recovered, I said to somebody, he will go off so far on the RAC, nobody will know where he's gone. But he absolutely didn't put a foot wrong. Yeah. He finished 9th overall with 150 horsepower Sunbeam, surrounded by cars with another 100 horsepower. Yeah. Incredible. He's only 20 years old, an incredible drive. He was a star, you see. But that was the only experience I had with Toivonen. I left Chrysler before the Toivonen days.
Yes, okay.
We did a year with Tony Pond in the Sunbeam Lotus. Then I left. I went, to be honest, I'd had a bit of a belly full, so I decided I turned my back completely on motorsport. I cancelled all my motorsporting magazines and I turned my back. But after
you just wanted a 9-to-5 job. I suppose at that stage you were married, young family, all that kind of thing, and the whole motorsport thing was that you were away so much.
Yes, I was, and the stress really it was relentless, and Des didn't help. He was a bit impatient, to say the least, After 18 months, it started to niggle at me again, this motorsport. And when Bill Blydenstein rang me, as I said, about 5:30 on a Saturday afternoon, asking me if I would like to get involved, I won't say I jumped at the chance, but I certainly didn't refuse. And then I worked with Tony again first of all on the Chevette and then the Nissan 240 RS, because Bill Blydenstein was running both cars at the same time. Yeah. So that's what got me going again in motorsport.
And I was going to say that the choice of the engine, when the competition was going for turbocharged and supercharged, why was it just that, going for normally aspirated?
Listen, now the decision was made in about 1980 to 83, and the only four-wheel drive car at the time was the Audi Quattro A1, which was 330 horsepower, and the Mitsubishi Starion.
Yes.
A four-wheel drive car. Both big cars. So they thought a naturally aspirated engine in a car weighing a ton, 1,000 kilograms, would be competitive. But by the time it came out, you see, there were turbocharged cars left, right, and centre. I mean, Patrick Head said that when the 6R4 was announced, it should have been the Evolution version. It was took too long. The gestation period was too long.
Yeah.
So the decision was made really before the turbo cars really caught on, to be honest.
Yeah.
And
Aye,
then
because by the time it actually come into being, like the 205 was, you know, that was the car to have. Then Lancia was supercharged and turbocharged by that stage.
well, the Delta was, the Lancia was, and then of course the RS200 as well, you see. They were all turbocharged cars. We were about 400 horsepower, but the A2 Quattro was 360. But when the Quattro Sport came out, those cars were capable of over 500 horsepower. It depends how far you turn the screw, you know. I'm not saying they rallied with that power, but they were those engines were capable of that, yes. So we were blown to the weeds in power output at the time. But I always thought that the Metro was nimble. There would have been events, I think, that would have suited the car had we had, I'm going to say luck, it's more than luck, had we had more proper development time with the car, because once we launched the car, we were into rallying. I mean, our feet did not touch the ground. It was event after event or testing after testing. We could have done with sitting back and doing some basic development work to have sorted out some of the problems we were getting on events. Plus, I have said this repeatedly, Michelin turned around and said, look, we're not going to continue with the 340 millimeter tyre. We're going to 390 for Peugeot and whoever else. You can continue with the 340, but there'll be no further development. But if you come 390, you will have the latest technology. So we, late on, had to change from 340 to 390. And that was, you see that the body shells were virtually in production. We had to change the rear end so that we could, because at the same time, we moved the rear wheels back to try and increase the wheelbase. The car was so nervous. I thought it was probably partly because the car was so short and stumpy.
Okay.
We tried our best. We moved the front forward theoretically 3/4 of an inch, and the rear was 3 inches. So increasing the wheel size and moving it back, as you can imagine, it cut the back end of the bodywork out.
Yes.
And the production people were saying, "Do you have to do this? Do you have to do this?" But we did it. First of all, we moved it back 2 inches in 002, which is the second car ever. And Tony reported that there was something to be gained from it in directional stability. So we continued. We sneaked another theoretical inch to make it longer.
Yeah.
And that was in the early days. Also, we were, as the car came from Williams, which is very short, in our opinion, suspension travel, particularly rebound travel, and that is from ride height for rebound. And it is so important with a four-wheel drive car to try and keep the wheels on the ground if you possibly can, because if you spin a wheel, it goes right through the drive system, and unbalances or upsets things. So we increased the wheel travel, and in so doing, we had to raise the struts and put those turrets in, which people hated, but we didn't have any choice.
No.
Now, when Williams were testing the car, by the way, Brian O'Rourke was responsible for the structure. He joined Williams to work on the new Grand Prix car, but it was delayed a year. And Patrick Head said, "Would you get involved with doing the?" I'm not going to call it the roll cage, but it is, it was a roll cage, but I call it a space frame for this car. It's something he'd never ever done before, and he did an absolutely superb job of this. Now, when they were doing some preliminary testing, first of all, they did some miles to make sure it all worked. Then they went, for example, to Cadwell Park, I think, and they took a rear wing off one of the Grand Prix out of the stores. Yeah. And they put it on the car. And Tony Ponder was testing. It said that the car was so much more stable and it was quicker. So wings.
was when I started
To think about it. But when we had the car, and the 3 cars we took to Almeria had no wings on them. They were sort of, in fact, the 3 cars were different in specification from the point of springs and dampers and transmission, front, rear. They were all different.
Okay.
Richard Hurdwell, who'd been with the car longer than I have, he was responsible for all that at the time. But it was very difficult to try and sort out. And we had 3 drivers as well. We had Tony, Marc Duez, and Colin Malkin. 3 drivers, 3 engineers, 3 cars. An absolute possible bloody nightmare. But
because they all wanted the car to suit them. It nearly turned into a race between them.
Exactly, you see. And I remember the first time we went on tarmac there, because they had a dirt section, like a forest section, but it wasn't as rough as we have in this country, but it was good enough for what we were looking for. And they had a sort of a hilly tarmac course. And the first time I went on there with Tony, he couldn't stop it spinning. It was just, and I thought, what the hell have I let myself in for here? But long term, I thought what we would do is we'd sort the car out, then add the wings to give us an advantage. But I realised we needed the wings to sort the car out. It was a little bugger. It was a handful. There's no doubt about it. I've said in my book that it's like a naughty child. You sort of it drove you mad, but you loved it nevertheless.
Yeah.
And it was. Yeah, but
were you part of the development of the wings then as well? Because that was a world first.
No. We had an aerodynamicist on our team, Bernie Marcus, and he liaised with Brian O'Rourke, Williams,
the Formula One.
Did a lot of wind tunnel work as well between them. Bernie principally so, but Brian was there for advice or whatever it was as well. So. I think you asked why did it have separate wings? Well, it was Grand Prix type thinking that governed the wings, and we didn't. We modified the wings to make them fit, but I don't think we did much development on the profile of the wings or anything of that sort. It was something that we adopted and saw the benefit of, and sort of thought this has got to be it.
Yeah, because it was such a new thing for rally, and there was nothing like this. It was a boot spoiler in the back of Mark II or whatever. Like this was completely alien.
Absolutely, yes. And of course, they were adjustable front and rear. The angles were adjustable. So, in addition to sort of springs and transmission and wings as well, it was really, I'm not going to say a nightmare, but it's very difficult to keep your mind clear on all these things.
Now, because there's so many, this was another more variables. There's all the variables with setting up springs and dampers and all this. Suddenly, then
and once we went to the 390s, we were into extensive tyre development, and wherever we went, we were tyre testing. And I said it slowed our development down considerably because a tyre can have a massive influence on the handling of the car, the response to the car, and things of that sort. So you change tyres and the car would feel different, and we were chasing our tails for ages with this car. Now, the boxes on the doors originally, the big boxes on the doors.
Yeah.
When we went to when we were in Almeria, they had a stretch of mud which had been imported from Morocco or something. It's very, very clingy mud. It was about 100 meters long. And we ran along that a few times, and we found that the front wheels threw the mud directly into the intakes to the engine compartment.
Right. Yes.
And in fact, it blocked them up. So the boxes are put on, moving the intake further forward, where not in the direct line of the front wheels. There have been lots of reasons quoted for the boxes, but that was the reason.
Yeah.
There's no more and no less to prevent the front wheels throwing the dirt into the air intake.
The air intakes, yeah.
Yeah.
Was it difficult working on a car or developing a car that you hadn't been involved in the design and the build of because it came from Williams?
No.
Okay.
No. The reason for that is competitions department, prior to the Group B stage, they took a standard production car and modified it. And that's what we did, whatever it was, whether it was an Escort or a Sunbeam or an Avenger or a Chevette or something. And that was the world we lived in. We were not capable of designing a car. It was not. We didn't.
It wasn't part of what you done at all. Like, it was.
We really took a car designed by somebody else, just as if we took a production car, standard Escort or something, and modified it. Now, the car we got, without being cruel in any way or critical, was not strong enough. It was built on racing principles. Lightness won the day. You know, for example, the drive shafts were rifle barreled; they were hollow. You see, and if we were testing down at Gaydon, which was Austin Rover's test centre, and we do a lot of work on the loose there. If when we'd finished testing, we'd put some racers on it and did a standing start. If we didn't break a drive shaft on the first standing start, broke it on the second. They just weren't strong enough. You see, there were things like that, and we found it came home to us when we went to Greece to test for the Acropolis Rally, where we chose a very rough, it used to be a stage section. Malcolm was driving, and the car would run once up and down, and we'd take an hour to repair it, you know.
Right.
Things that were bending and wearing out in this country were breaking in Greece. And in fact, we withdrew, we didn't do the Acropolis Rally. We went through the car and upgraded most of the joints and some of the things of that sort, producing a much stronger car. The first time we saw that car was in the Scottish Rally in 1986, the stronger car. And Malcolm had a horrific accident in Greece with something at the bottom of the front strut broke, and it just turned right and went over the edge, down the ravine. I mean, it was incredible. But he and the man in the car were totally unhurt, and they weren't wearing crash helmets even. Right. That's how strong the car was. In the latest Metro book, there are photographs of the car and the state it was in down there, and it was an incredible escape, but tribute to the inherent strength of that frame, as designed by Patrick Brian O'Rourke. Yes. Now obviously the 6R4 has got in its transmission a front diff, a rear diff, and a centre diff, and a step-off unit, which obviously divided the torque front and rear. And now, I think that Williams were in favour of viscous couplings in all three diffs, because I didn't find out till recently, Patrick Head spent some time at FF Developments when he was a student, where they were working on developing the viscous coupling. Now, we tried quite a few different centre type diffs. A plate diff which I designed, which didn't work, or a worm type diff like a Torsen, or a viscous coupling. But the handling of the car was better with either my diff or a Torsen type diff compared with a viscous coupling. You know, you could turn the car in and hold it on the line instead of sort of to and fro through the corner with a viscous coupling. And what we did eventually, the viscous coupling runs in oil, a series of plates running in oil. We went thicker and thicker and thicker on the oil to which supplied by FF Developments. So much so that they said, you know, you'll never run with this. This is out of the range that we're familiar with. But it was the secret of it, as far as we were concerned. We went much stiffer than anything we had tried previously. We were running on centistokes is the measure of the flow of oil. We were running on 60 and 100 60,000 or 100,000. We went to 300,000, and that's what we stuck with, and that's what all the cars were built with eventually. Yeah. And really, that helped it. Yeah. We kept the plate. We went to plate diffs front and rear because they respond much quicker than a viscous coupling.
Okay.
Right. But we kept the viscous coupling because it was a cushioning effect in the driveline, because it was fluid, you see, as opposed to.
Oh yes, it wasn't the hard hits then as such.
When we ran the Torsen or my diff, the car was very harsh. There was no cushioning there, so that's why we ran plate diffs, viscous coupling in the centre. Now the torque split front to rear, the two we had was 25/75 or 35/65, and the idea being that the 25/75 rear would be more suitable for tarmac to get the tail out in the corner, you see, and the 35/65 on the loose. But Malcolm favoured the 45/55 because he'd come from a front-wheel drive car, you see, to an extent, or the Quattro that he'd been running. So he was different from Tony and Marc Duez, who
come rear-wheel drive. Yeah.
So when we went on the rally, they had an option of final drive ratios, torque split front to rear for any tarmac stages, or you know, it was a bordering on a nightmare, but it was. Yeah.
And because Wilson had come, as you say, the front wheel drive, and the Quattro was 50-50 split, I think, wasn't it?
Well, the interesting thing was the A2 Quattro, they did away with the centre diff. It was solidly locked. So you could see that although Audi had experience with four-wheel drive in their wagon, whatever it was, their off-road Jeep type thing, they really hadn't sorted out four-wheel drive in a rally car, because we had an A2 when I worked at St David Sutton's. And in fact, we won the RAC and it was Stig. It was a factory-built car, and we went over to the factory to see it being built, blah, blah, blah. And if on tight corners, it just hopped up and down because the front and rear were fighting each other all the time. And if you went into scrutineering, you'd push it like that through and then turn in, and it would come to a standstill because the front and rear fought each other. You see, it was driven by extremely good drivers like Hanno Mikkola, Stig Blomqvist, Otto Rowe, Michel Mouton. It had 360 horsepower, 200 more than any two-wheel drive car. Super driver, so it wiped the floor with everybody. So it didn't need refinement at that stage because it didn't have any competition.
Yeah,
but
so far ahead.
Eventually, I think they ran a worm diff, a Torsen type diff in the middle eventually, but I don't know, because really speaking, we didn't tell journalists what was going on. I mean, it was because we wouldn't necessarily tell the truth, which is a terrible thing to
But that was at the level that everybody was at, wasn't it? That was trying to find that niche or something different. Yeah.
When we did we went to Nebworth House with two cars to make a press announcement with the 26R4s, and I went into the house to go to the toilet, and there was a fella on the phone. I know him well. I won't mention his name. A Ford man through and through. In fact, he was wearing a Ford anorak, and he was on the phone. He was on the phone to somebody describing the 6R4 to them. Yeah. It was all new to us. Yeah. It was a new world to us, this four-wheel drive thing. It was
because you had come through the whole rear-wheel drive. What was your opinion on this? Because you were a rear-wheel drive man. This? Could you see the future, or were you kind of almost going, "Oh, is this going?" Because remember at that time, everybody's going, "Oh, this is going to destroy rally, and it'll never be the same again with this four-wheel drive."
Yeah. I remember I was a member of the SMMT Motorsports Committee. You see, with Des representing Chrysler, and there was Stuart Turner and Peter Ashcroft representing Ford, and somebody from Vauxhall and somebody from BL. And there was an application came from Audi about four-wheel drive, and we went, if they can make it work, good luck to them. How wrong could we be? I mean, it was different, but I mean, Group B cars were incredible. Yeah. I mean, they were incredible. They were just something. Not everybody could drive them to the limit, but the grip you got, and of course they had phenomenal horsepower as well. They were just, the modern rally car is very well developed. And people say, "Oh, they're just as quick." They may be just as quick, but they've had refinement over the years, not just in transmissions, but in damping and things of that sort. The way these cars are damped bears no resemblance to the
No.
Bilstein cars or the Boga that Audi were using.
Actually, because everything was so new at that stage. Everything was just being developed on the hoof, almost kind of thing. There was no refinement. There was no evolution. It was new.
And we were in other people's hands. You sort of, you Bilstein was supplying dampers to everybody but Audi. And basically speaking, with Hugo Emder, who was the boss there, if he didn't agree with what you asked for, you didn't get it. I mean, that's all there was to it. And we would sort of suggest something to them, and then the damper would come through eventually, and you think, oh, that's not quite right. But if I ask for a change now, it'll be another 4 weeks coming in. So we didn't have the same control over things.
Yeah.
And I know when I worked at Salisbury Transmission, they did all the axles for Austin Rover in the TR, the Dolomite.
Yeah.
The Dolomite and the TRs and things like that. So, and they didn't ask for anything. They left the build completely to Salisbury's, who had very little competition experience, because
so they were just
working there when they were doing axles for the TR8, and I thought, well, there's nothing. They're not asked for anything special here. It's just a standard build almost. We were in other people's hands for two reasons. We didn't understand, and we didn't have the control.
Yeah.
Things have moved on. But those years with the 6R4, yeah, we learned a lot. We had to learn a lot, quickly. Yeah.
Yeah, and you said the initial cars were done in the red with the white roof and all, kind of like almost a throwback to the minis and all. There was huge expectations. Like Austin Rover probably put that on themselves, that this was going to be the next British car for the British people, and it was going to reignite. Was that a lot of pressure to put on the competition department at that time too?
No, because we would be unaware of it.
Right. Okay.
We just kept our heads down, and sort of just got on with the job. It was just sort of not panic after panic, problem after problem. Which is what you get when you sort of develop a car, particularly from scratch like that. It was very sort of involving. I mean, I got 3 test books which I compiled at the time, and every lap we did, name of the driver, who was in the car with the driver, the time, and then the driver's comments, what we did to the car, next run, and at the end of the day, I'd have to sit down and read through it all and try and make a summary of what had gone on, and some things you think. And what with the 6R4, something I'd never ever come across before, you'd end up with something quite satisfactory. You'd go back, and the car was different. And I think, why is this? It was exactly as if it had a mind of its own. And of course, we're talking about a very quick car here.
Yeah.
It's just, we did 100 standing starts as part of our test on transmission and everything there. And we chose the heaviest car we had, Tony driving, me on the clocks. And we averaged, I think, 3 seconds from 0 to 60 and 8 seconds from 0 to 100, sort of. I mean, that's pretty quick. That's pretty quick, that is, In fact, I had a stiff neck the following day because I was looking out the side window to click the watch and all this type of thing. But yeah, it was. People used to say, "Oh, it must be fantastic to go to all these overseas places," and I say, "You land, and it feels as if somebody's got you with the neck like that, squeezing harder and harder until the car goes bang." No, it isn't.
And was there much pressure to get the 200 ready for homologation?
Yes, there was. Now, you see, John Davenport was dealing with Austin Rover, the management in Austin Rover. Some people who saw no benefit in motorsport, blah blah blah. You always get that. We had it in Christ. I used to write reams and reams about the benefit of Motorsport, and I don't know whether anybody ever read it, you see. Originally, the 200 cars were road cars because they had synchromesh gearboxes in them, you see.
Yeah.
And we used to have meetings here at Canley, and it was the warranty people were there, and the service people were there, and the ones who were involved with the barrier impact test, and they were sort of, oh, what are we going to do about this? What are we going to do about that? And how often are we going to service? And how are we going to warranty? Until one day just decided it won't be a road car, it'll just be a competition car only. And they disappeared like rats down a drain pipe. Whoosh, they'd gone. So there was no. So it then became a competition car only. John struggled to get approval for this thing, and I remember that December 1985, there was a ride and drive at Gaydon with 002, 003, cars number 2 and number 3. And we thought, just in case we have a problem, we'd take an SD1 rally car there as well. So there were senior management involved with the side of the company that was responsible for motorsport, plus the chairman and the managing director. They were sort of important people there, and they rode in the cars, sort of just went around, and then there was a presentation in the what used to be the control tower. Then Harold Musgrove came down to us because we were there, said, give us a thumbs up. So now we had to release all the drawings by the end of February to allow the build to get it homologated in time for the RAC. So in addition to trying to sort the car out, we were having to convert drawings that we'd had from Williams, which were, I don't when I say sketchy, that's not being disrespectful at all, but no. It was a situation of, you could do almost a sketch, take it next door, and the person there could know what you wanted. And if he didn't, he came through and said, what's this bit? What's that bit? Yeah, okay. Now, because Williams were not capable of doing 200 off, we had to find manufacturers who were prepared to do 200 within this timescale. So bits went everywhere, which meant to say we had to convert these drawings to British standard drawings with all the clearances, all the materials, all the heat treatments and everything on there. It was a bloody nightmare, to be honest, within the timescale. And we were trying to rally it, test the car. So we had a fella over at Longridge, Mike Barnett, and he took control of these things. We were giving him drawings. We didn't know what he was doing. We were giving him drawings, and he was working the Oracle. Now, Cap Martin Road in Coventry was the old Daimler factory. They built the engines, they built the gearboxes, they put everything together, and they transported the engine, the gearbox, the step-off unit, the rear diff in a big lump over there. They built the suspension units, they transferred them over there, and they had a shop which was allocated to the build of the 6R4, where they did all the welding of I still call it the space frame, and put on some Metro body panels, welded some Metro body panels onto that. They built the cars and they drove them out and they stocked them there before bringing them down to Cowley, where the 200 cars were kept, you see. So yes. It was all in-house. Yeah. It's quite an amazing thing for a mass production company like Austin Rover to do, because all the others, I'm sure, were done outside.
Yeah, because Ford, I think, wasn't it Reliant built theirs, the RS200,
yeah,
I think.
I know, but everything was done within Austin Rover, which is to me amazing. And this lad,
because Austin Rover at that time was very unionised as well too, weren't they? So you probably had all that to work with.
But I mean, I met a fella down at Goodwood a few weeks ago, and he said, I've driven every 6R4. I didn't know he was, but he was the person who drove them from the end of the track to the yard where they were stored. Fair enough, you're probably right. So those were the road cars, and they were a kit form. The owner had to do something. It was like connecting the ECU or something like that, right. So complete the build, and then it didn't have to be type approved. It was a fiddle.
Yes, that was a way around the rules as such. Yeah.
But of course, we were allowed then to do 20 Evolution cars, which were obviously they were upgraded from 250 horsepower to 400 plus.
Yeah,
which is what was the car that we valued. Yes. Yeah.
And like from my own like personal point of view, like my memory of the Metro and why I love the car so much was they come over to Donegal in '85. Like that was the international debut of the car. I
It
think
was.
like Tony was such a funny character. You know, I was asked why he had to retire. Oh, the throttle stuck open. You know, and like, oh, what was the car capable of? 147 mile an hour or something in a straight line. Like
Yeah, no, no.
this was compared to like at that stage we thought a Manta was an incredible car. To see this thing then, it was just it was like like it was like a spaceship come landed.
I was at that Donegal event,
Yeah.
and he wanted to flatten the wings, have no
Right.
downforce, and I said, I don't think that's a terribly good idea, Tony, because the car was geared to 150 miles an hour,
Right.
and we were at the end of the stage where he retired. It was I mean, I can tell you this, but Graham Rood, who we were associated with, worked for the Royal Aircraft Establishment, and he was involved with jet pilots and things of that sort. And he gave us some jet pilot helmets that had an inner on them, and you put the in and you did the inner up and clamped the earphones to your head, and then you had the dome over the top, right? Because the noise in the 6R4 was incredible, you see, so you couldn't hear. But obviously they were very illegal. So we were parked at the end of the stage up there in a lay-by with the proper helmets, the genuine ones, because there was a checkpoint down the road. So,
Yes.
I mean, they'd have had hysterics had they seen him turning up with his khaki big helmets. So we were there, and we put him in a bag and put him on the floor in the lay-by.
Yeah.
So that we would drive away and they would come, they would switch them over, and then we'd pick the bag up, you see. That was the idea. But we're sitting there minding our own business, and all of a sudden, Tony comes on the phone and said, the engine's misfiring, he said. And then Rob Arthur, who was his navigating, said, there are bits everywhere, he said. Anyway, the car, because Tony wouldn't stop, you see, the car came to a standstill eventually. And when we heard all that, we thought, right, the service crew were over the hill and they couldn't hear us. So we drove off to where we could make contact with them. And we'd left this bag on the floor in the lay-by. And if you don't mind me saying, he said, nowhere but in Ireland could you leave a bag on the floor and have it untouched in those days, you see.
Yes.
And then when we came back and saw the bag, we thought, oh, God. Anyway, we walked into the stage. And yeah, we walked back up and there were engine bits for, I'm not going to say for miles, that's an exaggeration. But see, David Wood, the engine man, said to me, the V6 is two three-cylinder engines. If one side goes, the other side will continue to drive. That would be unaffected by it. So he just drove it until he wouldn't go any further. He had the spare engine with us. He fitted the spare engine and then he went as a double O car.
Double O for the rest of the weekend.
And, David Williams, the Motoring News rally reporter, we always thought that David didn't have a fat lot of time for us. I don't know. I think I was wrong eventually, but so we said, would you like to ride in the car with Tony? And he said, okay then. Well, Tony was tamping along at some incredible speed into a village, and he lost control of the car, and he hit the bank, and the wing flew up into the trees, right? And the car proceeded down the road backwards. So it wasn't much of a sort of an advert for the car. And I don't know how David Williams took it, but it was a bit of a hair raising incident. But yes. But Billy was there in the 911, wasn't he?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's right. And Billy was we thought was the one to beat there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
So that was I mean, I've written it up actually, but our trip to and from Donegal in this little aeroplane is another story of it. We landed in Donegal in this field, which is quite illegal apparently, and the pilot was severely censured for doing it, and we had to go to Belfast to pick the plane up on the way back. but it's a long story. But, the rally was quite tame compared with
it wasn't half as much fun.
It wasn't much fun. It was just when the pilot says, "Can anybody see the airfield?" it was pouring with rain and blowing a gale. I thought, oh God, what's going on here?
What we let ourselves in for. And then by later that year, like you were due then to make the World Championship debut and the RAC rally.
That's
and
right, yes,
it
yes.
was what a story that almost turned out to be.
Yes. I think that in the notes you said, how was he beaten? Well, the S4, the were first and second, and Tony was third. And Tony thought that he lost out, or we lost out on the icy stages, and he thought that the Pirelli tyres that they had were superior to the Michelin's we had in those conditions, on sort of because it was frozen on that surface. That's what he lost his time. So he says anyway. Yeah. So after the RAC, we thought, here we are, good. But of course, with it being so slippery, it didn't result in very high loads through the transmission system, because of the lack of grip. When he went to the Monty and something like that, on tarmac and things like that, it's a different kettle of fish. And then the problems. I'm going to say then the problems started.
Yeah. But even to come away with a podium on your debut, even
on
now
your
that
home
was
event as
unheard
well.
of. Yeah, and your home event too. That was unheard of, really, wasn't it?
It was, and fair play. The reaction to the car was incredible. People cheering left, right, and centre, because it was a new British car on a British event, because we were so used to Lancias and Peugeots and Audis, of course, because up until that time Audi had sort of wiped the floor with everybody.
And at that time too, you had Top Gear reports on nightly. Rallying was big news. It was it wasn't kind of the hidden away sport that we kind of almost is now. That we rarely see it on TV. It was back page news and the main sports news and the newspapers. It was everywhere.
Just think how many world-class drivers were competing in the UK in those days, and the number. I mean, I'm going back to the 70s now. So you'd get the British Championship on some events. You'd get 10 to 12 manufacturers competing with the Hanno Mikkelers of this world driving. It was incredible in those days compared with now. Yeah, just three more plus Skoda. Yeah,
and
it's a shame.
Yeah, that 85 RAC, that was also the debut of the Delta, which took the first and second, the S4. Like from the team's perspective, looking at this supercharged, turbocharged car, what were the thoughts? Was there a bit of spying going on? Were you trying to see what they were doing?
On an event, you just concentrate on what you're doing. We knew the car was there, but so what? Unfortunately, you just concentrate on what you're doing, and it's just that was the world we lived in at the time. And anyway, as I said, how do you find out? Because everybody will tell you fibs, They tell you fibs for two reasons: they don't know, right, or they're not sure. Why did you retire? And as I said, if you're retired on an event, the only positive one is if you hit a tree, you dead.
Everybody knows that.
But you said, well, I don't know whether it was the front diff or the centre diff or something, or the gearbox or the engine. Sometimes it is vague, but an accident is clear cut. It's an accident. Yeah.
And at that time too, it was a weekend of a silly note beside that. There was a TV program on One and Streak. And it was this was bringing, rallying to the people as well. And there was a Metro featured in that as well too. That obviously got it into the public's imagination what rallying was, and the Metro was front and centre of that as well. Yeah,
you see, John Davenport, he writes that he had to suddenly one day he had a phone call from the producer or whatever it is about the Metro, and he said, how did you find out about the Metro? Because the Metro was supposedly, it hadn't been announced officially, but they found out about it, and when he proposed involving the Metro in his programme, the company were all for it, you see, and that's what it is, because it was not a proper Metro, as you can imagine. And Colin Malkin did all the stage driving, and the star did this. So it was good. It it was on every week, I think, for I can't remember how long. But it obviously did a lot of good, and people got used to seeing this thing that was originally a Metro.
Yeah.
Because it was, you see, Group B cars, manufacturers get involved to sell road cars. I mean, that's the reason for it.
Yeah.
So I say it's sometimes it's very difficult to identify the rally car or the road car, but all the Group B cars did have a similarity, apart from the RS200. Ford thought completely differently when they did the RS200. Now, the Metro, nowadays, lots of people have never seen a Metro, 6R4 I'm talking about, and it attracts an awful lot of attention, particularly younger people. But we can see it as a Metro.
Yeah, we know what it is. Yeah.
But with the current group of rally cars on the television, if I can't see the badge, I don't know what it is.
Yeah, it's hard to tell it's a Yaris or a Puma or
Toyota.
whatever. Yeah.
You see, I can tell the Ford because it is different. But that's a shame, because lots of these hatchbacks do look very similar, and it's why do you go rallying? I'm sure manufacturers must ask that question over and over.
But back in the 70s and the early 80s, what was it? One on a Sunday, selling on a Monday. That was the perceived thing.
Yeah, yes. I did the Cyprus rally in, I think, 1976. We didn't win it with Dimi Mavropoulos, where we finished second, but the importer said by Monday all the stock of Avengers had been sold. Sorry, did I say Metro? I meant Avenger.
Avenger, yeah.
The Avenger in 1976. Yeah. He said all our Avengers had been sold by Monday. It wasn't hundreds. It was sort of, I don't know.
Yeah, but still, the
That's what we're after. That's what we're after.
Yeah. And when you mentioned them, when it got into 86, that's when kind of the issues started to appear. Like, what were the main difficulties or problems were starting to surface?
Well, we had engine problems galore. Engine problems. You see, we didn't do enough engine development, as I said earlier. Every engine that was built went in a rally car, because that was the commitment we made to computer vision and who else. You see, we needed really to sit down and do some just pure engine development, because for example, now the rev limit on the 6R4 was 9,200 RPM. That was the rev limit. And it is a naturally aspirated 3-litre engine, so you would think you'd have a very full torque curve all the way through. It's not like a turbo where it lagged and then went, but it did. Okay. It had the characteristics of a turbo to an extent. Now, I drove one of these cars. I can't remember where we were. Might have been Corsica, somewhere back to the hotel, and I accelerated from 2,500 RPM in top gear, and it picked up cleanly, wonderfully. Got to 4,000 RPM, and it went very harsh, and it staggered. Its rev counter waved about and this till it got to about 4.7. Then it cleaned, and off it went again. So I spoke with Cliff Humphreys, our engine testbed builder, and he said, "You won't feel that in the car." And he showed me the power curve of the test bed, and it went up, it just flattened between 4 and 5 slightly, and went again. He said, "You won't feel that in a car." And I said, "Well, yeah." Now, after we'd finished rallying, what they did, they commissioned a test bed so that it could take the car exhaust system instead of the test bed exhaust system. And he said to me, "I know exactly what you mean. It won't run at 4,500 RPM. On the test bed at full throttle. It's got a massive hole in it."
Yeah, just that's the difference between running like a kind of race bred test bed than a rally test bed as such. Yeah. So
now, after we'd finished rallying again, they were still using the Cowley test bed, and they were building engines for privateers. And they built an engine, they ran it on the bed, and the hole had gone. I said, "Is it funny?" And they had a look. They put the wrong exhaust manifolds on it. They put the Clubman exhaust manifolds on it.
On the international.
It sorted it out. And I'm going to say, it makes me feel as if I wanted to spit. If you'd done proper, old-fashioned engine development, one of the things you do is modify the exhaust, the primaries and the secondaries, until you get the optimum. It's part of an engine development scheme.
Yeah.
It has all been done by computer.
Yeah.
Chris Humphrey, Chris Walters, and David Wood. They said this is the optimum. This is what you need. Blah blah blah, and they believed it, and everybody believed it.
Because you were in no position to argue, as you say, you had to accept what was coming because.
That's right. Yeah. Yes. And before the '85 RAC, we went to Brechla, testing with Dunlop, of course, with Michelin, of course, and we took a fully 400 horsepower test car and a clubman spec car, but it was exactly the same spec in terms of springs and dampers, transmission, apart from the engine, just 250 horsepower as opposed to 400. And when we had a break, Tony said, let's go for a ride in that car, the club car. And off we went. We went down around the circuit and back on it. And I looked at my watch and I thought, it's only 4 seconds difference in about 3.5 minutes. And I said, I must have made a mistake there. So he said to Rob Arthur, come and have a ride, Rob. Same thing again. And he said, it's so much easier to drive than the international car. Mainly, you don't have to change gears so much because they haven't got this hole.
A hole
But
in
you've
there.
got to keep it over 5,000 RPM to miss the hole, which means to say a lot of wheel spin, a lot of scrabbling, you see, which wastes time. Plus, you've got to be on the gear lever all the time.
Yeah.
In fact, whenever Tony and I test, he never says a word. He just sits there, I sit there, and it's only when he stops do we speak.
Get the information.
He's driving the car, talking to me. It is that easy. I mean, I just say, I feel weak. We could have had so much better power.
Mm-hmm.
When they were in Corsica and they were testing before we ever went there, Tony at night they met Bruno Sabi, who was in a 205. He did the Corsica, and they swapped cars as they do. And Sabi said to him, I was expecting this car to be completely different. I didn't realise that you would have to rev it.
Yeah. Because it's normally aspirated, you thought that'd be, you'd have the power right across.
Yeah.
So there were fundamental problems with the engine.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, of course, it would shred its belt and have hysterics. Now, what they did was they put a much longer belt with a jockey pulley. They went to a 20, I can't remember, 23, I can't remember how 123 tough belt or something, and that solved that. Now, in the design, the fellow who drew the block put the bosses in because he said, I think this needs a longer belt, but he was only a draftsman.
Right.
And he put the bosses in. And so that cured that. The exhaust would have cured it. Yeah. Also, in the Scottish Rally 86, I think there were 9 Metros in it, and 8 of them retired for different reasons. Galanders was the only one who survived. And Malcolm was leading by 3 or 4 minutes in the Metro, the first time with the uprated joints and everything of that sort. And the engine went rough, wouldn't start, blah, blah, blah. 2 days later, we went to Finland to do the Finnish testing. And after a few days, similar thing again, started to go rough, wouldn't start. And I said to one of the mechanics, would you check the valve clearances? And we found that the inlet valve clearances are all closed. The exhausts were all right. So we swapped engines because we had a spare engine with us. And after a few days, the same thing happened again. Now, what had happened? The valve seats inserts were of phosphor bronze, which is racing car practice.
Oh, yeah.
And the dust just ate them away.
Right.
So we changed the inserts from phosphor bronze to sintered iron.
Perfect.
Problem over.
Yeah.
And you see, it was racing car.
Yeah.
The engine was, I'm not going to say a lot of it is copied from the Cosworth DFE engine, which is the Grand Prix engine, but Chris Walters, the consultant, had a lot to do with Cosworth at that time. And I think a lot of racing thinking was carried over to the 6R4 engine as well.
It was racing knowledge, not rally knowledge. It was brought in.
Above, here we go.
Yeah.
you know. So it was fraught with some inbuilt problems, which we only discovered along the way.
Yeah. And like you know the way like the 205 like the sprouted bigger wings and there's an evolution of it and the Quattro, how many evolutions of it was there plans for the Metro? Like we know then by mid '86 that the championship then was they're going to ban Group B by the end of the year. Like did it almost didn't make sense then to try and develop the Metro beyond where it was then at that stage?
Well, at the end of the year, I did a report saying if we'd have continued, this is what my recommendations were, and it was such things as, you see, the diffs were very marginal in strength because Williams thought the car would come in at under, I think they did, under 890 kilograms, which meant to say that 2.5 litres would be the maximum we were allowed.
Right.
You see, 960 was the limit on 3 litres. So the diffs weren't big enough.
Okay.
When we went to bigger wheels and tyres, we had to lower the gearing to compensate for it. The car was heavier. The power output went up, the torque went up. And so the system was seeing nearly twice the torque it originally saw.
Okay.
And now the diffs weren't big enough. So what I was going to say was, put the rear diff, which had a bigger crown and pinion on the front. Do a new diff for the rear. That would be one of the things we could do. Sort the engine out, in the whole, like the cam belt, the cam belts, the valve seat inserts and things of that sort. And there were quite we had internal problems with the bolts for the front drive shafts coming loose, but basically I'm going to say that was my fault. We went to a production type inner joint, which was very, very short, and the bolts were too short. The longer the bolts, when you do them up, they stretch a little bit.
Okay.
And then if they slacken, they can sort of release but still hold tight, But with short ones, you could no elasticity in them.
Oh, there was no movement in them then.
And the same thing with the prop shaft. They were just short bolts, and they kept on coming loose. If the driving bloody mad it was, sort of. So that would need looking at.
Mm-hmm.
The power steering pump was driven off the front diff, you see, which Malcolm hated because you didn't get maximum assistance till you were doing 9 miles an hour. And so Malcolm, when he come into service, he'd come down, try to turn into service, no power assisted steering, and he'd go past, you see. It used to drive him mad. So we mounted it on the engine for him high up, but Tony didn't worry about it. No, Marc Duez, you see, that's all.
Uh-huh.
So, but when the drive shaft bolts came loose, what it did, it wiped off the belt driving the power steering pump.
So you lost power steering.
There were certain things that of our own making that we could have got around. Yeah. But as I've said there, with 400 horsepower, nice horsepower all the way through, a stronger car, I'm not saying it would have been a rally winner, but it would have been more competitive on Nadgery stages, non-Nadgery rallies, where its nimbleness would have sort of shown it up.
Yeah.
Or
Because
been to
you look
expect.
at, national championships, the British Rally Championship, the French, the car was winning. The car had the capability. It was just,
Yes,
as you say, it was just the World Championship was at that different level again. It was just, it needed a wee bit more refinement, maybe.
Yes. Now, concerning Ireland, we did Donegal, of course, and we did Galway. Who won Galway? I can't remember. I think David Llewellyn had an accident there because we had a number of satellite teams. There's RED who ran David Llewellyn, Per Eklund, right? And also there was Konrad Schmidt, SMS in Germany, who ran Marc Duez and Per Eklund. In fact, I'm not quite sure now.
Yeah.
And of course, there was Didier Auriol did the French Championship.
Was it RED at that time, wasn't it?
And he won the French Championship. When we went to Corsica for the rally, there was this lad hanging about with a camera around his neck. He was, and I thought, what's this bloke hanging about all the time? It was Didier. I'd never ever seen him before. But he'd never seen a 6R4, you see, and that was his first introduction.
Yes.
And he loved it. He absolutely loved it. You know, it's in the book he says it was, and so did Marc Duez. He thought it was my toy, he called it, you know, because they got used to it.
Yeah. When, I suppose, to start wrapping things up, 40 years later, the car is still so fondly remembered. You know, it's still the iconic Group B car. What do you think makes the car so special?
Don't know. I can't understand it. But it's special. Is it universally special or just special in this country?
Well, that could be it.
Yeah, because it was a British car, wasn't it? And it was a Metro, and everybody knew what a Metro was. You know, sort of not that Metro, but everybody had heard of a Metro. So it was something that was, the name was familiar to people, and as I said, it attracts a lot of interest wherever it goes now.
Yeah.
It's because it's different, isn't it? It's different.
And the noise, I think, too. Like, we know what a BDA Escort sounds like. We know, a Quattro. There's certain cars, by the noise what it is, and the Metro has that distinctive quality as well, hasn't it?
Oh, it certainly does. Yes. And as I said, you can't before the first RAC, the gearbox builder said, "I'm not very happy with the finish on these gears." So what we were doing was we were taking club cars at Park next door, putting one of the rally gearboxes and running it from Cowley down to the M4 and back to try and polish some gears. And I said, 2 hours in a Metro without ear protectors, you couldn't hear for hours afterwards. I mean, the car was bloody deafening because the engine was just there. Just a plastic thing between you and it, which was so, and it is a car. It is, yes. And of course, there was one auction for £427,000, was it, earlier this year?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Come on. Yeah. and after the banning of Group B, we sold them for 14,000 quid or something.
Yeah.
I mean, the front diff gearboxes, step off, and the rear diff cost us 12,000. So the rest of the car for 2,000 quid. But what were you going to do with them?
Yeah, well, that's it. Nobody wanted them at that point, were they?
No. The saviour was, of course, allowing them at 2.5 to run. Yes, because you just sit there looking at each other, wouldn't you? What am I going to do with this?
Mm-hmm. And then you've talked about the book. Yourself and McLean have produced this fantastic book, and it is the go-to god of a book, the Bible for Metro lovers or anybody has any love of Group B cars.
Yes, yeah. I'm not saying I did that.
Uh-huh. That's like the Metro 6R4 Diaries, yes. Uh-huh.
That's like for 6R4.net, MG6 6R4.net. I did for, and Reinhard Klein, the German, has done that.
Yeah. Yes.
So he thinks the Metro's got of interest, but it was as I said, I could look upon it like a naughty child. It's very bloody mad, but we just loved it, so there's something about it. Plus, of course, Tony was the one that did most of the development work, testing with us, and he was just great.
Yeah,
very perceptive, very good test driver. He would say, "Don't ask me anything about cars. I don't know anything about cars." But as I say to people, you'd make a mistake if you thought that was the case. He was a very good test driver. Yeah. The other lads could drive. Malcolm, David Llewellyn, and they would give you feedback. But the small details, Tony was good at that. Like, you drive you mad, You would do a day's testing, and then the phone would ring, and he said, "I've been thinking," and I used to think, "Oh God, here we go." Can we try that, something or other? And I say, try it immediately, just to keep him quiet. And if it didn't work, you never heard of it again. But oh yes, he was very good like that. Yeah. Yes.
And he could have been, and he was world class, but he really could have been elite level. But he never looked into trying the left hand drive. He must have been very set in his ways, was it? That kind of thing.
He had a test drive in a Fiat Mirafiore,
Right.
Right, but it was left hand drive, and they wouldn't do a right hand drive version. You see, and he said a right hand drive car comes naturally to me, and so that's the nearest. But of course, he was one of those determined to beat the opposition. That's what he wanted to do, and that's why he stuck with this thing. But he was got a lot of tales about Tony. He was just I liked him as a person. He was a real gentleman. He was good fun to be with, and I admired him as a driver.
What can we say? But once again, thank you for your time and your stories. An absolute pleasure, Conor, to hear all those stories.
Oh, look, and it was only the tip of the iceberg. I would say, if you had Wynne sitting down in the right environment, he could have chatted all day and all night, and had just tons of stories and things to say. And the amount of different drivers over the years that he's been connected to, it's just incredible.
That's for sure. Yeah, it was an absolute pleasure on our part. I suppose then, we're always wanting, to hear if anybody has other suggestions about all our unsung heroes. Maybe we haven't heard their story, and we'd love to hear and see, and we'll do our best to try and get them onto the podcast.
That's it. So if anybody has any suggestions, please reach out, let us know, and we'll go hunting and digging and see if we can get to speak to these people.
That's for sure, yeah. So that's the latest episode of Krunching Gears. Please like, share, rate, subscribe. And until the next time, take care, speak soon, and bye.
That's the proudest day and the proudest time and the seat of a rally car, because that day and that hour and those minutes, I got the bit between my teeth. I really stood up and was counted and said, this is not getting away. I remember when we pulled on our helmets and Donald says to me, what are we doing? I said, we're going for gold, Barrett. That's all was said. I can still picture that run. That was just the best run ever.